Okay. Hey, Esther, good to talk with you and really excited to dive into this subject around guilt around eating. And I think the first question is really around what we say guilt around eating, is that really what we mean? Is it is it about guilt, or are there other emotions that people feel that you see in environments around diabetes and around just generally out in the social media landscape around this feeling of what we would call guilt? Or is it guilt, or is it something else?
I feel like it's part guilt, but I think the guilt is rooted in shame, and the overlying message of this all is about shame. And that's where this guilt is coming from. I think a shame plays a lot into food, diabetes management, anything overall, like wanting to follow a certain thing. I believe that's where a lot of the shame is coming from, and that's where the guilt comes from at the same time.
Yeah, and that feeling of shame really, distinct from guilt, shame, being the feeling of unworthiness of belonging, right? Or of love even, or of connection, different than like guilt. This guilt is usually based in values, right? And so the difference being, are people really upset about what they eat because it doesn't align with their values? Or is it really like, and what are some of the examples maybe that you see of this, of people who are feeling, they feel bad, they don't know how they feel, maybe they call it guilt, but maybe it's shame actually, right? Is what you're saying you see. um
Right.
you know how do you kind of look at that? um
I see it in many
or
ways. I think a lot of times, people feel that like they should have done better or they didn't do enough or they're not good enough. And they will use whether that be their food choices as justification of that. If they are trying to follow something, they might feel bad that they didn't eat this, or say, they have guilt about eating maybe fruit. They think fruit is bad for them, or it may cause diabetes because of the sugar. There's too much sugar in it. Whereas we know that there's going to be sugar in there, but at the same time, with fruit, we do get fiber, we do get vitamins, we do get antioxidants from it. So why are we guilting ourselves or having shame for eating something that is potentially providing us nutrition? Same with other choices, which could be the other way where, like, you may actually like that diet type product, but now you have guilt, like, well, am I bad for liking this? And like all those thoughts start to come in. So, think about like diet soda. Some people might just actually enjoy diet soda, but there's that guilt of, well, am I dieting because I'm drinking diet soda? Am I restricting because I'm drinking diet soda? Or cauliflower rice, it tends to get its rap of like being a replacement of rice, but there might just be some people who enjoy it due to the fiber it provides, or it just might be the texture. But now you have people questioning themselves, well, am I dieting, or am I not this person, or am I still, following diet culture because I do like this diet replacement type meal? So there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes in it because of this whole you should eat a certain type of way, or these rules that continue to be put out there, even though they may not come out as rules. Um, that tends to happen a lot.
Yeah, and it becomes kind of a social culture, right? These rules too. And they feel like some of them are indoctrinated, right? And that's goes back to our parents, maybe, or
Right.
the people that were around, that those are the rules they absorbed, right? And then, but largely it's in our environment still, right? It's an everyday thing. And so I think that the examples that you laid out are perfect in the sense that they really explain and connect with this overarching feeling that people have of, what they quote unquote should eat, right? Like, oh, if
Right.
I if I don't eat, the brown rice, then I'm not eating what I am supposed to eat or should eat, right? And if I have the cauliflower rice in that case, right, it's, oh, well, why, there's something wrong with me because I um, you know, because I didn't eat the brown rice. I ate the cauliflower rice, or that I replaced the brown rice with cauliflower rice. It's like, which I'm wrong either way, right? And so I think that this question going back to, is it really what happens to people's sense of their relationship with food? And and how do we get them to start to listen to their body when they already are at this place where they feel there's something wrong with them as a result of all of the messages that have said of what you're supposed to eat and what you're not supposed to eat. And then if you want to be non-restrictive, this is what you're supposed to eat, like and these sorts of things, like what you should eat foods, and how they make this chronic pattern that people get into of feeling like there's something wrong with them. How do we kind of break that and help people to, start to listen to their body and really, heal that relationship with food? And is it just giving themselves unconditional permission to eat, or what is it?
I think it's not just giving unconditional permission to eat. I think it's really asking, like, what is it that you're eating? Like, or why are you eating? Like, are you eating this because you generally enjoy it, or are you eating it because this person on the internet said if you eat this, you'll achieve this? Like, why are we eating? Like, there's many reasons for food. Food's pleasurable. Food provides nutrition. So, like, what are you eating for? But at the same time, if you're worried that, oh, I need to eat the brown rice for fiber, let's think about how else can we get fiber? Like, what else are we adding into our meal? If you don't like brown rice, don't eat it. If you don't like whole wheat bread, don't eat it. You can still get fiber in there without having to now make this substitution or go buy something else that you don't necessarily enjoy. So I think it goes back to, like, why are we doing this? Is it for health? If it is for health, what does health mean to you? And what are ways to achieve that without restricting ourselves and now getting hyper fixated into behaviors that don't serve us?
Right. And I think that's a beautiful point, because what we're getting down to here is, why do you want what you say that you want? Is it actually something that comes from you, from your own values, or is it really from the outside? Is it really this external, stigmatized, area and I think this question of, like, what I always say is, whenever I walk into, even to like your classic center of fitness kind of facility, talk to some people that are amazing people, they can see it immediately when you ask, what's the number one, what are the top reasons why people come in here, their goals, quote, if you will, when they come in. And it's always the same thing. It's, the first goal people say is they want to lose weight, right? I want to lose weight. And then the second one is, oh, I want to look great, or I want an aesthetic, right? And anytime we come back to that, you say, why? Right? Because at the end of the day, when most people say they want to lose weight, what they're actually saying is, if I weigh X amount, then my body's going to look a certain way, right? So if I go from being 200 pounds to 180 pounds, then, oh, all of a sudden, I'm going to look a certain way. And then really, though, when you ask them why is that body image so important to you? Because that's, at the end of the day, of the people that say they want to lose weight, it's 25-50% of them, it's really for a body image. And then the other people say body image, so it's really 50-75% of people who are trying to go after a body image. But when you get down to it, it usually comes back to this question of, what do you actually value? Like, oh, they believe, they've been taught and indoctrinated and reinforced to believe that if I have this body that looks a certain way, then everything in my life is going to be so much better. And oftentimes that's not the reality. And the path to getting there scars them even worse than, wherever they're at currently. And so this question of, like you said, what do you value? And also, too, I think, what are some helpful ways that people can start to identify what they might value, or how to explore what they actually believe is health? Like, what is health to them, right? So
Yeah.
I'm curious how you think of those.
I think there is just asking the question. So even if it's like, what is that body weight? What was it about that body weight? Like, was there joy? Like, was there happiness for some people? Like, did that provide you more access to the world, whether that be a sense of belonging, better jobs, social status? So for some people, it can be more of accessibility to things that someone else hasn't had access to. So just being able to explore those type of questions and even just asking them. But at the end of the day, understanding that what they believe and what they want to achieve, it's still their choice. So I think that comes up along with it too. But just being able to explore those questions, but knowing that, the guilt and shame they feel and where that's coming from, not to acknowledge what they're feeling at the same time, and not for them to to feel bad about having those feelings too, right? So we just need to also emphasize that shame doesn't motivate behavioral change. So if we can even come from that type of viewpoint to begin with, that can be just helpful with our clients.
Right. And just finding, to whatever extent, some feeling of safety, of the ability to just be yourself, like you said,
Yeah.
allow your choices to exist and that sort of thing. Um, there's some interesting parts here where we get into like how this affects people on a mental health basis, especially people who are going through a diabetes journey or something like that, right? You know, when they
Right.
think that they're motivating themselves through shame, right? Like you
Right.
said, and shame is not a good fuel for motivation. I personally felt that in my own life, early in my life. It's just not a good way to push ourselves forward. It may be temporarily, but the what happens on the back end of that is usually catastrophic or disastrous. And so, or at least significantly more painful than if we would have just started the right way to begin with, right? Even if it feels slower to go down this line of asking what my values are and that sort of thing. But how are ways that you in practice, help people with this concept of, they've been motivating themselves through shame, and really this concept that I think have talked about, which is they feel like there's something quote unquote wrong with them because they're not able to do what they quote unquote should do, right? These shame oriented external standards that exist that are, overemphasized, right? Definitely. But the concept of um how do we help somebody like kind of look at their um this deeper root judgment that they've made of themselves? Like, how do we kind of stop along the way and start chipping away at that? Because it usually starts from a small, every day they do one thing, and then that one thing adds up to two things, and then three things, and then four things that they did wrong. And then they start to believe this bigger picture that there's something wrong with me. Is it really just these small little moments of like saying, hey, look, my body just likes the cauliflower rice and it tastes better, so I'm just gonna have that. And you know
I
what?
think it's
I'm okay with that.
right. I think it's a small moment, but I think it also depends on the individual and what the situation may be, but also celebrating those small wins, acknowledging the small wins, or it's like, or even if they're big wins, but I more so like, okay, I ate today. You ate cauliflower rice, cool. You ate cauliflower rice. You ate white rice, you ate white rice. You ate um a sugar sweetened type snack. Okay, you ate that. You did something more. So it's more so like, can we actually focus on the strengths versus the weaknesses? And as like, providers, practitioners, can we come in with more so of like it's definitely person centered, but less of a deficit approach. Like, let's look at it like, okay, this person, watching our language, but just understanding that the shame that leads to, that's part of stigma. Stigma leads to exclusion, rejection, blame, but that also doesn't help with one's outcomes in their health. Most of the time, if someone's feeling some type of stigma or shame, they're actually avoiding their appointments. They're actually, doing a little bit worse with their self-image, their mental health. So there's lots of negative impact to stigma and shame overall. So just being able to provide that positive space and a safe space, um, shame and stigma can be dismantled. Like that can, you can cure that, quote unquote, cure it. That you have to just realize, like, what does your practice look like? What does your environment look like? Like, there are ways to help decrease stigma and stop stigma.
Yeah. And I love that because I think that what you're talking about lines up with so much of what behavior scientists even say from a different lens than, a dietitian, like, that's specifically working with the nutrition of somebody. I think because your background also too, you're both a diabetes educator and a dietitian, you've seen a lot of things. I think that there's this consistent theme of effectively reframing. I think that's kind of what I heard you describe, right? It's like
Yeah.
reframing the little things as, look, like that's okay, like that's good.
Right.
It's just little reframes that happen, and the ability, the skill set that we want to help people develop, which is to be able to reframe on their own, right?
Yeah.
To be able to look at it from a perspective that's actually self-affirming, not self-destructive, right?
Right.
And I think that's something,
So,
is that kind of something around how you,
yep, the ability to reframe and just resisting the urge to blame and shame the individual
right?
and its
I,
state impact. So, we tend to use the word compliance and adherence, but those are just, negative connotations. Like, okay, if the patient or client ate 3 times a day, let's say they ate 3 times a day. Why does it have to be that they didn't eat XYZ? Let's focus on what was done. So just figuring out ways of how we can resist the urge to blame and shame, but also reinforce the strengths of what was done. That can help increase engagement with people.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's a really good summation of how we can look at this concept of guilt around eating that people oftentimes think is quote unquote guilt, but it's really shame, right?
Right.
And what they can do to lessen the influence or the impact of that on them. So it's a really helpful conversation. I think it will actually help a lot of people as they go through this. So I'll say thank you so much. I know it's all the time that we have, but we could probably talk for another 3 hours on it. But
Right.
thank you as always, Esther.